Well, it is really fun to have on the podcast today. She is sharing her experience in early morning habit. My mom. It is such an honor to have my mom here today. I just sneezed, so we had to edit that out. You can all thank me. Your ears thank me. But what I am so grateful for is that you represent this like collective stage of life for so many women. And I'm really honored to have you on here to share your perspective about the early morning habit program. When you initially read about the program, what drew you to it? Why initially did you sign up for early morning habit?
So, if we're being totally candid, I my first thought was this is a program Anna's doing that is not for me
Mm,
because of the whole quote unquote early morning piece. I am by nature a later in the day person, never have been a morning person. Not that I can't do it. I've had to for years. I'm a registered nurse, 40 plus years. I've pretty much always worked day shift. Once I'm up, I'm good. It's the actual getting up, making myself do the alarm. I'm not a snooze person. I give myself the max sleep, and the alarm goes once, I'm out, and then I'm good. But I hate the alarm.
yeah.
And so, when I saw early morning habit, I think, wow, it's a great concept. I kind of wish I was a morning person, but at the same time, once I talked to you about it a little bit and realized it's okay to give myself a little latitude on that part, it's more about how I'm starting my day than when I'm starting my day.
Mm,
Um, and I really wanted to participate and be involved in what you were doing and be part of your pilot. So I thought, okay, well, we'll give it a whirl, and I'll let myself be flexible where I need to be. So there were parts of it, as I understood what it was to be about, that I realized I need this. So
mm, mm.
that's kind of where
What,
I,
as you started it, you said that once it got rolling, you were like, oh, I do need this. What were those elements that you thought, oh, yeah, I do need this?
yeah, just a better overall start to my day in general. Um, I had pretty much fallen into a long habit. Um, I I had fallen away years ago, truly, from any kind of habit of starting my day with the Lord. And it's not that I spiritually was struggling per se. It just wasn't a habit. Um, and I kind of relied on my Sundays and you know um, worship music and that kind of thing to connect with the Lord, but not really a first thing in the day time to just get in the Word. And it was laziness, to if we're going to be honest. I just had gotten away from it um, a long time ago, and my habit more really had become more go out and get the newspaper, get my cup of tea. I'm not a coffee drinker. Love the smell of it, but never liked the
Yeah.
taste of it for some reason. So I get my good
And
strong cup of
somehow I'm her daughter, I promise. Biologically.
all the kids. Yeah, all you all
We're
love
obsessed with
coffee.
coffee, and our parents both drink tea.
Yep.
Anyway,
And
sorry.
I think that's part of why I love the smell of it, is it usually means that there's kids at home. But
Oh,
um anyway, it kind of became a pretty set routine of making my morning tea. And these are, I should qualify, these are days that I'm not working. If I'm
hmm,
working a shift that starts at 7 a.m., I am getting up with the minimum time needed to get myself to work, make my tea and take it with me. But I'm not reading anything. I'm not doing anything else. So, um, but yeah, but starting with the newspaper, I do still like the physical copy of the newspaper. May or may not do the crossword that day. Um, but I grew up in a home that was always very in touch with the daily news, and
mm,
like it or not, that has been part of just who I am. I think too is just a general sort of world awareness of what's
yes.
happening in the world and the country and whatever locally. But and that's kind of how my day started. But then it also it also kind of became the newspaper and my to-do list.
Yeah.
I can honestly say it didn't start with, and still doesn't really, with getting right on my phone. I'm not a social media person. So that is not a struggle particularly for me, but definitely, maybe just checking the email, and any
Mhm.
major news feeds. But it just wasn't a particularly edifying start to the day
Mm.
as a general rule.
But a very, very common one. I mean, I think that is a very, socially acceptable and common routine, I guess, is where I'm going with that. Like, it's a very understandable, practical, and frankly, still probably healthy than a lot of people's morning routines. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that routine. But to your point that I would love to hear is how then did early morning habit and the program change that? And how did you see that change even just your day as you changed your
Yeah,
morning?
yeah. The other thing that was interesting about the timing for me, as you well know, the early morning habit pilot group happened to start right at probably one of the craziest times of my life. In some respects, I am in my early 60s. Both of our sets of parents are still living. My folks have increasingly been struggling with pretty significant memory loss, and it was becoming apparent. Were still living independently in a very large house, 3-story house, in a retirement community. So it was a matter of getting them to see the need to transition to, more of an assisted living circumstance in that community. But at the time, for years, they've been living independently, and that needed to change. And we had started that process, and we're under the impression that it was going to be months and months before there was a 2-room suite available for them in the area where they needed to transition to. So we were kind of taking our good old time, and suddenly we get an email, "Hey, there's a unit available. We really think they should take this, but you need to commit, because there's a wait list. They can't just put it off." We had travel planned, significant travel out of the country, 10 days and then 16 days at a time that had been planned
Yeah.
over a year ago, and they're telling me they need to make this move in 2 weeks. Um, and so I, to say the least, was overwhelmed. I was just like, I don't see how we can make this happen. First, they're, trying to get them to understand
Yeah.
that something we've sort of been talking about is now going to happen in 2 weeks, and downsizing them from over 4,500 square feet to 2 rooms. Um, it just, I was like, and I'm still working, and
Yeah.
not full time, but enough that I was like, I don't see how I can make this happen. But make a long story short, we did, and that's its own story. But that was the timing, and I really wanted. I felt like I had committed to doing the pilot program, and I thought, this is either the worst possible time for me to
Yeah.
start this, or
Yeah.
maybe it's
Yeah.
exactly what I need to somehow,
Mhm.
um, somehow make this happen as well as everything else. And that really turned out to be the case. It was exactly what I needed at that time, because
Mm.
it wasn't that I was even waking up in the morning with my to-do list. My to-do list was buzzing in my brain 24/7 at this point.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out all the logistics of this move, and helping them to comprehend what's going on. And um, so I would go to bed and wake up just thinking about all these things and all the mental lists. And so to start the day trying to quiet that, I mean, it was tough.
Yeah.
Probably one of the hardest parts still is for me to sit and get those things to quiet,
Yeah.
um, and enough to, you know, look at what scripture I'm looking at that day.
Mm.
And how quickly I realized, man, I'm already, my brain's already gone to the to-do list again,
Yeah.
and to kind of rein that back in again. So um, it it was it was exactly what I needed, but it was a tough time to try to learn those kind of new habits for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I love what you said though about the idea of reining back in the to-do list because I mean this is you're not the only one. This has come from several people. And it's one of the reasons that we actually start the program for those of you listening and watching um, with this concept of breathing. So we literally start before we even read stuff in the program, start practicing breathing techniques that help you to be present and still because we live in this, especially as women, where we almost never experience just true stillness of body and of mind. It's really, really hard, especially when there's literal and figurative noise surrounding us constantly. So, this is a really difficult thing for women, especially to do. And I would love to hear your perspective on what was the payoff? So you're starting your day with quiet and you are actively working on stilling that in your mind. What was the benefit that you saw to doing that? Because I know there's women already hearing this and being like, okay, that sounds fantastic. However, as soon as I wake up, I see that to do list and it feels less productive to start my day, not just jumping right to the to do
Mhm.
list.
Mhm.
How did you see the payoff in your life where it was worth and is worth starting your day this way, despite this pressing list of things that you need to do?
Right. So for me, a couple things. I know I alluded to it earlier. I am not by nature a morning person. I also am somebody who doesn't necessarily need a ton of sleep. I can get away. Like I said, once I'm up and going, I'm good to go. I'm not a napper. And so I for this period of time particularly, I did start setting an earlier alarm, probably because my to-do list was so long.
Yeah.
There was so much going on, and I quickly realized that, yeah, I don't love the alarm. It's still tough, and this was still winter, and so it was dark,
Yeah.
and the actual getting up was difficult, and yet I started discovering how much more I was actually getting done just by starting my day earlier. For
Yeah.
me, again, because I don't necessarily need, I don't need 8 or 9 hours. I'm good on 6 or 7. Um, but I didn't necessarily start going to bed a whole lot earlier, but I definitely was getting up earlier, and I felt like I was accomplishing so much more.
Mm.
Um, but the other thing I think for me um, was it was easy. The whole emotion, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here. The
No, go for it.
the tuning into the emotional part of it as well, and starting the day with gratitude was really important for me during that time
Mm.
because it was easy in the overwhelmedness of all the details to start to get really negative. And
Yeah.
my personality can lean that way to begin with. I can, see, you know, tend to lean toward the negativity rather than seeing the positives by nature. And so it was a time where it just was really easy um, to just think of all the tough parts and the bad things and you know, be frustrated by, people's reactions to things
Mhm.
or even just, to have phases where like, why is this all falling on me?
Yeah.
Um, and feeling like and even though people who could help were attempting to, there's only so much others could
Sure.
do in some of
Yeah.
these situations. And the reality is, as the one of two children for them and the oldest daughter and the local child,
Right.
it was going to fall on me, and that's just how it was. And remembering that this is a phase of life, we just need to get through it. But there were so many little things to be grateful for that I might have easily missed
Mm.
um, in the in the overwhelm of it all. That taking that time in the morning, to focus and write down and journal some of those
Mm.
little things and big things, that there was so much to be grateful for, and starting with that focus, really helped during that time to kind of stay grounded,
Mm.
and not to say that, I mean, there was kind of a comical moment one day well into this whole process where I had an honest meltdown, and me,
Yeah.
I'm not a meltdown kind of person, but I needed it. It
Yeah.
just it was nothing to do with mom and dad. It was actually a tax thing because I do our taxes,
Mhm.
and something was happening when suddenly we had this multi-thousand-dollar tax burden. I'm like, where did that come from? I
Yeah.
don't understand what just happened, but and I just lost it. And it was like
Yeah.
all those emotions kind of,
Yeah.
but I think without the, starting the days with some of the gratitude piece of it, those meltdowns might have come sooner and more often,
Mm,
just because you could just so focus on all the negatives that were happening.
yeah. Yeah, I love that perspective. And for those of you listening and watching, what she's alluding to is a core concept of the entire program is that we want to empower you to start your day being, not doing. And specifically, we take that time and we intentionally apply a practice called emotionally intelligent gratitude. And where we're, identifying the emotions that exist. We're not ignoring the difficult, just like the season that you were in during the 6-week pilot group. You don't ignore the reality that exists, but instead it's actually acknowledging it, claiming that this stinks, this is hard, but then you are covering it and sort of reframing that those uncomfortable emotions and the challenge with gratitude. And then we take it to the next level and we talk about how we can implement that through God's word and prayer in that quiet time. So, I love that perspective. And, I've told my mom this before, but there's this phase of life as women, and I've had fitness nutrition clients in this phase as well, where it's possibly one of the most taxing phases of life. I don't know, I'm not there yet, but you have parents that now need you. You're always a mom, that never stops. But then you've got grandkids on top of it, and you're still working, and you're still doing all the things, cooking, meal planning. For some of you, you love that. I personally don't. Um, so it's a lot. It's a lot. And I'm curious what you would say to the woman who's listening and watching, who's in that phase but who hears the concept of early morning habit. Maybe she goes onto the website and she'd be considering it, but she's concerned about the time, maybe the price, or the potential loss of sleep because many women in this phase of life are also very tired. They wake up as tired as they were when they went to bed.
Mhm.
What would you say to that woman?
Um, I mean, I would definitely say, give it a whirl anyway. But allow yourself. I had to be careful because one of the things that I think a lot of women probably in this phase of life, again, because you may have parents still living that may or may not need you on a
Mm,
daily or weekly basis or whatever, or um, you may have grandkids or kids who need you in some way, and it's I find it's a struggle sometimes to not feel like I'm not doing a great job at any of them.
yeah.
Like I'm spread too thin. Um, it's easy to just sort of start to feel like you're failing to some at some level on in every role. I'm not as committed as I feel like I still should be at work. My grandkids live 3 miles away, and yet I hardly see them because I'm so occupied with all these things. Um, and and I realize that's they've got busy schedules too, but it's easy to start to spiral into
Mm,
I'm failing at everything, and I'm only doing all these things sort of in a half-hearted manner. Not that I'm half-hearted about it, but just um, that I can't seem to really commit myself fully to anyone. And I had to be careful not to. I started the program and started to quickly feel like, okay, great, this is one more thing that I'm not really doing 100%.
yeah.
Um, because there were some aspects that I definitely, didn't pour myself into as much as
Mm,
I might have liked. Um, and I think the big thing that I'm learning as I get older in many aspects is to cut myself some slack.
mhm.
I have high expectations, and I think um, you know, it- life has different phases, and just realizing that some of these things aren't going to last forever. Again, our situation is somewhat unique to be in our, early to mid 60s and still have four living parents. We have been
Mhm.
so fortunate in that up to this point, those parents have been fully independent.
And we
They
like
have
those
not.
parents. Let's throw that out there.
What's that?
I said, and we like those parents. Let's throw that out
Yeah,
there. Not only are my 4 grandparents living, but I have a fantastic relationship with all 4 of them. So we actually
yeah,
like our grandparents
yeah,
slash
they're
parents.
awesome
So
folks, but it does mean
grateful for
that we're
that
still
too.
spending time with them,
Yes, right.
where
Yeah.
some folks might have that time to, if their grandkids say we're local,
Yes,
to be
right.
seeing more of them, where we're
Yep.
still kind of looking at our folks saying, we don't know how long we're going to have them, or we don't know how long we're going to have them in, this state of alertness and
Yeah.
capability. And so, we're still sort of investing time and just, appreciating the time that we have with them as well. But it does sometimes leave you feeling spread thinner than you want to be.
Mhm.
And so, and like with the schedule part of it, I realized I at this stage am probably not going to completely revamp my life um
Sure.
clock,
Right.
and didn't necessarily want to. The days that I do work and still am needing to show up at 7 o'clock, I'll be honest, I don't get up early enough
Right.
to, do the full early morning habit thing. Um, there's other aspects of it that for me weren't uh, a big transition. I'm a regular exerciser. I enjoy exercise. I'm very active. So, the exercise piece wasn't difficult. I wasn't always doing it first thing in the morning. There's
Mhm.
definite perks to getting that out of the way first thing. But sometimes I'm, looking to add or, vary because I might be training for a hike or a longer run or something, a race I want to do or whatever. So,
Mhm.
um, just to not to be so legalistic about these
Mhm.
things that you feel like then when you're not doing it exactly the way it's quote unquote supposed to be done, that then you
Yeah.
feel like, oh, I'm not. It's one more thing that I'm not quite doing
Yeah.
to the full extent, and
Yeah.
just allowing yourself that that bit of slack and um, wiggle room, I guess you could say that's
Yeah.
okay. That's the fact that you're doing it at all, and if you
Mhm.
come away with some piece of it that it's a benefit to your new
Right.
routine, then it's worth it for sure.
Yeah, it's that concept that we talk about, where I talk about all the time, whether it's here on the podcast or an early morning habit, or I mean, you name it, it's that idea of, trying to avoid the all or nothing mentality and really embrace imperfect progress. And like you said, allow that to sort of be the end goal, not to do it
Hmm.
all perfectly. Um, and what you've alluded to really well, also, ladies, listening and watching, is that early morning habit is a guide. This is not this is precisely how you need to start each day in this very rigid format. It's a guide, and everyone does benefit from different things. We do a whole section on sleep. We saw incredible feedback on the sensory sleep rehab. That second to the emotionally intelligent gratitude practice, women find the sleep rehab the second most beneficial slash transformational aspect of the program. So we are going to work on sleep if you are struggling with it. And then, like my mom mentioned, there's the fitness element. But I hope people come away feeling like you just said, mom, that there is flexibility. It's a guide, and can be tailored to your specific stage of life, season of life,
Hmm.
etc. So I'm not sure if you felt that way or not, but that would be the goal for women.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this, especially addressing, my age group for women, the sleep thing it's very real. Like there's these stereotypes
Mhm.
about, oh, you middle-aged women, we just sleep well. Well, we don't. It's a physical thing. We stop making some of those chemicals, natural chemicals that do help us sleep. So, if you need to supplement that with
Yeah.
something, that's okay. Like, find what works for you. But I think and again with this particular piece of it, there weren't big adjustments for me to make because we already kind of implement a number of those things.
Right.
Really dark room, no uh, no phones where they can be
Mhm.
heard during the night, kind of
Mhm.
thing, unless it's close enough that if it would ring, we just recently finally got rid of our landline, so now it does need to be. if I needed to be called in an emergency in the middle of the night, that I could hear it ring, but I'm not going to hear the little pings of, some
Yeah.
notice that came across or whatever that's going to wake me up. And we're definitely not on it. We're not big TV watchers, so not usually doing that right before bed, or certainly,
Mm-hmm.
on my phone, um,
Mm-hmm.
scrolling social media. But I
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot of things that people are probably sabotaging themselves and not realizing it, where, that whole
Mm-hmm.
sleep section of the program, I think, is probably really beneficial for a lot of people.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions to ask, if you could use one word to describe how you felt and your morning felt before early morning habit, to one word to describe how you felt and your morning felt after early morning habit, what would you say? So, for example, for my own life, I would say from chaos to calm.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's nothing like putting somebody on the spot. Feel free to take a second.
Yeah, I said one word is tough. Um, Again, some of it is specific to the actual timing for me
Hmm.
of
Sure.
when I got introduced to the program. Um, but for me at that time, certainly one big change would have been starting my day feeling overwhelmed,
Hmm.
um, or overloaded,
Hmm.
to after and into the program feeling like my day was starting more collected.
Mm.
Um, like, uh, not even necessarily in control, because things weren't necessarily in control, but I felt more collected. Like, this is okay. Yeah, there's the to-do list is long, but there's a lot
Hmm.
to be grateful for, and we'll get through this, and God is good,
Yeah.
it's you felt just a little more, yeah, I just collected is the word that comes to mind, and
Yeah.
and
I
not
love
quite
that.
not
So say
not
that
quite so
again. From
frazzled.
what to what?
What was the word I just used? Um,
Overwhelmed.
overwhelmed and overloaded,
Hmm.
um, to more collected.
I love that. From overwhelmed to collected. If you are listening and watching and this story resonates with you, and women, we see you, this phase of life is hard. Is hard. I've talked to so many women in this stage, and I know I'll get there eventually. But you are seen, and we would love to help you rise with this concept of being, not doing, and truly see holistic change. We take a high level approach and then we deep dive real fast. So we would love to have you join us. If my mom's story resonates with you, I would love for you to say thank you to her. If you want to join Early Morning Habit, we would love to have you. But click on the link that is in the show notes, and that is specifically her referral link. She does get a thank you gift for anyone who signs up for the program through her link. And Mom, it was really a blessing having you, not just in the program, but I'm grateful for your willingness to share. My mom is not one to get in front of a camera, so I fully acknowledge this is a gift from her to me. But I am thankful for you sharing, because a lot of women need to hear this. And I know they're resonating with you. There are women all over hearing this that are like, that's me.
I'm
That's
sure.
where I'm at right now. So from my heart, thank you for being in the program and thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching the Imperfectly Empowered podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking below. And if you missed our last video, then be sure to check it out right here. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Your story matters and you are loved.